On June 6th, at 2:54 a.m. local time in Ukraine, seismic stations in the country and neighboring Romania detected a seismic pushover. Russia, in an attempt to complicate Ukrainian counteroffensive that the Kremlin fears could take start from Kherson region, has blasted the dam of Kakhovka power plant. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane and our weekly wrap-up on UATV channel explaining the hard truth in easy terms. Kakhovka Dam held back a vast reservoir that supplied water to communities upstream and provided cooling water to the nuclear power station in Zaporizhia, around 160 kilometers, which is 100 miles away and which currently is under Russian attack. More than 80 communities were simply washed off the face of the earth or severely damaged by the catastrophic flood. Hundreds of tons of hazardous contaminations were swept into Dnipro River and are now carried downstream towards Black and Azov seas. Cemeteries being washed away. Sewage waters are now where they used to be drinking freshwater wells, all water bodies ruined on a vast territory. Mines that Russians planted are being flushed away by the flood and can and are exploding literally anywhere. Hundreds of thousands of people left without drinking water. Tens of thousands remain in flooded areas. They are still there. I think I'll quit telling you the disastrous figures by now. I mean, we all are products of that massive entertainment paradigm, if you know what I mean. We want to be shocked. We crave for more surprise. We need to be awed while staying at a safe side. Staying safe and experience all these emotions is all about the entertainment, you know. Entertainment is a paradigm self-imposed on us by us. Just like 1,000 years ago in ancient Rome, we are a bored society that craves for nothing more than bread and circuses. It's just the tech level that differs. Well, none of that you're getting here today. If you need a dose of entertainment and surprise, a dose of safe horror, just Google it. The explosion on the Kakhovka Dam, the aftermath, and be safely horrified all you want while sitting in your safe sofas and safe offices. Today, everything will go the other way around. We're here in Ukraine. We have air raid alarms blaring in the air every night, and the shells and pieces of Shahid drones and missiles are literally, without any exaggeration, falling onto my house's rooftop. So I do have all the right to make you, dear world, look at the things otherwise today. My way today. Ukrainian point of view today. You used to ask me questions, but maybe today it is my turn. Let us in Ukraine ask you, the world, questions today. While Russians have blown the dam and are worsening the terrifying aftermath of this ecocide by shelling the territory and shooting at volunteers trying to help, how are world's international organizations doing these days? Where were them United Nations? I mean, these very United Nations, whose Security Council was recently presided over by Russia, remember? Well, these guys can be looking for all sorts of justification for such an outrageous political impotence, but the fact is the fact. What are we as a world united for and what against within this decrepit international body? So we can have a bunch of insanely well-paid dudes who express their deep concern in regards to whatever is happening. Putin waves a nuclear club. We're deeply concerned. Putin blackmails the world with hunger ruining the grain deal. We are deeply concerned. Putin, and nobody but him can approve such an inhuman act, blasts the dam, stages an ecocide, and leaves hundreds of thousands of people without drinking water, and shoots volunteers coming for help. Let's express the deepest of our palette of concerns. Oh, and don't forget to celebrate that Russian Language Day, of course. It won't help those communities whose lives and property was flushed away by the Kremlin-made disaster in Kakhovka, but it should look nice on a contrast background anyway, and looking nice is all we are united here for, right, dear nations? Well, here is our Ukrainian question. What is the goddamn purpose of all these international bodies and members and councils and United Nations chairs authority if we, as the world's nations united, can't even say back off to an international thug usurping our chair? Where are your international voices, dear world? I ask the question because we in Ukraine hear only one voice speaking loud and clear on what happened in Kakhovka.
Немає зараз у світі There is no one left in the world today who does not see that Russia is ruled by savages. Savages who themselves are the biggest disaster on our planet today. Together with our partners, we must do everything for the world to prove that it can cope with such disasters, with such terrorists.
Every now and then we also hear them different voices. Those voices come from quite prominent media like Washington Post, the New York Times, Die Welt, Reuters. These voices are doing their best to sound unbiased. So they say, like, the dam was blown up in Ukraine, and Ukraine and Russia, the parties are blaming each other. All these media and all these international organizations are doing their best to keep the status quo, and by doing their best, they do the worst. Ignore the bare facts. To see the facts is quite easy if you're looking, of course. I was urging you before, and will be urging again and again and again, dear world, do not pay any attention to what Russia says, ever. Only action is worth looking into. The facts. The undeniable fact is a dam in Kakhovka was blasted on the 6th of June. That was a crime perpetrated. Another fact. If Russia is the perpetrator, well, let us look for that litmus of truth, actions that the Kremlin undertook recently. And as we look, we see that a week before the disaster, Russia adopts a resolution prohibiting any investigation of any sort of damage caused by any sort of military or terrorist action on hydropower facilities on the territories Russia has occupied in Ukraine. Again, a week beforehand, the Kremlin adopts a resolution that, in Putin's way of thinking, just magically waives all the Kremlin's international accountability for terroristic approach and exercises in Ukraine. The Kremlin has written itself a resolution of absolution and adopted it by itself, publicly. I mean, this is hilarious. It's like when a notorious thug adopts a resolution prohibiting any investigations to be carried out at his future crime scene and sends such a resolution to Interpol with an exact crime scene's location in it. Like, so for everyone to know that from now on he has nothing to do with the crime that he's about to perpetrate. I mean, am I the only one smelling smoke in the room, or that one just was the biggest smoking gun in the history of smoking guns? You might ask me, what's the point of all this for the Kremlin? Well, some questions should be answered by returning questions. And what was the point of starting a territorial war in the 21st century in the middle of Europe? What was the point of those mass graves all over Ukraine? What was the point of abducting our children? What is the point of blasting a dam on the territory you say you control, other than that you are fearing to lose such control? Well, the answer to all of this is one: Russians. That is what they are, see? It is how their national Russian ideal looks like, to turn everything they can into Russian and destroy the rest. And you might keep on asking me all you want why we in our land far, far away should care for Ukraine, why we should help and be sending our tax money to these Ukrainians. The answer is so simple that actually you should be feeling it in your guts, even without me answering it really, but I will put it into easy terms for you. We all are the same species, you see. We are humans, and such things as human values really do exist, and human values exist universally all over our human universe. And if you, in whatever galaxy far, far away you happen to live, are not ready to stand for these human values all across our human universe, to fight for it yourself, or to actively help those who are fighting for them instead of you, with such an obstructive approach to our whole human values, you devalue them. And I think it is quite fair to say that if you are to ruin our universal human values, you also should be excluded from our human universe, to be deprived from all the benefits of it. Medicine, science, trade markets and finance, art and sports, you name it, all the collective universal knowledge and abilities of humankind should not be available to you anymore in case you deny its values. Don't believe it can ever happen to you in your far, far away land? Well, then just take a look at Russia. That is exactly what is happening to it these days. Well, to be honest with you, the UN Security Council actually is worth something. During an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to do its usual business to express its deep concerns in regards to the blast on Kakhovka power station, Some states called on Ukraine and the Russian Federation to resume negotiations to end the war as soon as possible. Since it is a day of questions today, here is my questionnaire to these unbiased, peace-loving states. If Russia would be waging a genocidal war against your state, just as it does against Ukraine, and the purpose of this criminal aggressive warfare would be complete destruction of your statehood, as such an erasure of the national identity of your people, just as it is the case for Ukraine, would you choose to negotiate with such an enemy, offering him a respite he desperately needs, while you possess the momentum to drive him out of your home? Second question. The defeats and failures of the Russian Federation at the battlefield have forced the Kremlin to change its tactics, but not the intentions. Knowing that, would you choose the short-term halt in the war, or rather would you use all the help in the world you can get to win the war for the sake of long-term and just peace? If Russia would occupy as much as 30% of your homeland, just as it did with Ukrainian land, would you, remembering what Russians did in Bucha, find it fair and just to abandon your people to sufferings such as rape, children abduction, murdering and tortures under the enemy's occupation? Russia has numerously proven itself to be an international thug, a terrorist country led by a terrorist at large. Would you negotiate with a terrorist by the very facts of such negotiations, as such, encouraging future crime of aggression, legitimizing the future terror and the terrorist approach on the international arena, sending a clear message to all future Putins? Wage wars, take what you want, and do not stop at nothing to hold power. The world is weak and frightened, and will accept any of your terms under the disguise of peace negotiations. The Kremlin's way is one continuous, senseless, reckless and cruel act of terror, no matter if self-harm inflicting. If flooded low-lying Dnipro river's banks were occupied by Russia, still being mercilessly ruined by Russia. Every day the occupiers stay on Ukrainian soil increases the risk of ecocides for the whole world. First, Russian-fired at Zaporizhia NPP from their tanks, then endangered its cooling system, and now Russian propaganda, in despair, openly exudes hatred and xenophobia, calling for destruction of Kiev Dam so to kill as much Ukrainians as possible. If that would be the capital of your state, Russia urges to destroy and murder millions of your fellow people, would you negotiate with such a terrorist state? Knowing that your country has all the international support and is able to defeat and expel the invader from your homeland, and that is exactly the case for Ukraine, won't you honestly be calling it the only necessary step towards new safety architecture for the world, or would you deliberately blow the chance, betray your nation, and kneel before the brutal invader, thus desecrating the memory of Ukrainians falling during this war, calling it a peace talks? If all of your answers to all the above is no, then my last question to you, dear peace-loving states, is on what grounds you're offering all that to President Zelensky? Repressions are a new norm for nowadays Russia. On the other hand, not only for Putin's Russia, it is true, and not only these days. It was the case for Russia 500 years ago, 400, 300, a century ago, or today. Nothing ever changes in Russia, you see, and it is simply irresponsible in terms of your own safety to expect it ever will. It never will. To the better, never. Let me show you why. Crimean action artist Bogdan Ziza was sentenced to 15 years in prison on anti-war reasons. Vladislav Kraval sentenced to 6 years and 3 months for damaging the Z banner. Roman Balyasin is being persecuted for trying to paint over the Let's Z banner just as well. He managed to flee Russia. Abubakar Yangulbayev, a human rights activist from Chechnya and a former lawyer for the Committee Against Torture, said that his mother, Zarema Musayeva, who has been held in pre-trial detention center in Grozny city for more than a year. Even the Kremlinites themselves are acknowledging there is not enough space in prisons anymore. Tatiana Moskalkova, Commissioner for Human Rights in Russia, which, of course, is an oxymoron, judging by the reaction of Russian society to the crimes of the Kremlin, there are no human rights in Russia, and there is no need for them. However, the Russian human rights lady proposes to reduce the number of female prisoners, Prisoners are full, she says, and the Kremlin needs someone to raise new Z soldiers for its criminal wars anyway, right? All that is a norm for Russia. You see, it has always been the case after all these Russian lives. There are nothing but cannon fodder and expendable and cheap matter for the Kremlin. Suit yourself. Media disabled since his 18th armless Alexander Zahedinov. His one lung is also completely dysfunctional. Alexander was convicted of drug dealing for 7 years. Absurdly as it is to convict an armless person who barely can breathe in such crime, Alexander cannot gain back his freedom on absolutely false and absolutely formal grounds. According to Russian laws, the absence of limbs is not included in the list of diseases that prevent the serving of the sentence. The 37-year-old is serving his sentence as follows. He laps food from a dog bowl and takes a shower once in 3 months. When his wife Christina arrives, she washes him and treats his body from suppurations. Well, what could be added to all that? I wonder how soon the Kremlin will use Stalin's approach to all of the inner problems. Just show them all. And it is time for a minute of righteous explanation. More on UATV. The question I picked today for an answer is a question by user Tony1William8476, and the question is, how many in percentage Ukrainians but root from Russia in Donbas support Ukraine? Well, thank you for your question. It is, to say the least, not too safe in the occupied territories to express your pro-Ukrainian position. But here is the thing for you. It is a footage taken on March 8, 2014 from Donetsk before the Russians occupied it. Take a closer look. They are all holding Ukrainian flags, see? You can say it was a pre-staged and prepaid rally, but there simply were nobody there in Ukraine back in the day to pay for it. Ex-President Yanukovych went on the run a few days beforehand, the event you are watching. So, believe it or not, the rally was us, Ukrainians, saying Donbas is Ukraine. And Russians say what they always are saying. There was a referendum during which these very people you see on this very footage suddenly changed their hearts. True story. They really did change their hearts. The point is the gunpoint. I mean, almost everyone changes his heart being at the gunpoint, right? And one more thing. This, Holodomor, a great famine of 1932-33 in Ukraine, instigated by the Soviets. It has been recognized by dozens of parliaments around the globe as an act of genocide. And one of the most affected regions was Donbas. Tens of thousands of people starved to death there. And then Russian Soviets acted as usually. They gathered Russians from all the corners of its vast territory and sent them to Donbas. To those empty houses of Ukrainians died in a handmade Soviet Russia's famine. So I can't be absolutely sure of the exact percentage of those pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian people living in Donbas by now, but there is one thing I'm sure of. All these talks and rumors about Russian-Ukrainian friendship on Donbas are nothing else but Kremlin's narratives. And don't forget that gunpoint. It may be hidden, but it's there. Want a proof? Go to Donbas as a pro-Russian person, and then, when you're there, publicly change your heart to pro-Ukrainian, and just see what happens. It was me, Henry Keane, on UATV, breaking the hard truth into easy terms for you, dear world. Also, so you can better understand what is going on the very front line here in Ukraine, follow the link below to my interview with two Ukrainian sisters, Anastasia and Veronika Mutse. Anastasia is a combat medic on the very front line in Ukraine, and Veronika is a volunteer living in the Netherlands, providing help to her sister's unit. Subscribe and comment, and I will do my best to answer your questions. Stay safe and tune for more on UATV tomorrow. See you soon.